Good evening. I'm Brian Brennan. I'm an assistant principal at Oakville High School. Joining me are the other members of the group that Dr. Gaines asked to investigate this. John DeWally is director of the Alt School. We have Andy Ross and Jason Lander, who are assistant principals at Melville High School. And I have Jason Biot along with me, who is new assistant principal at Oakville High School. He replaced Matt Willett, who was an assistant principal at Oakville High School and has since moved on to other things. So Jason moved into Matt's role.
Welcome, Jason.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I just want Mr. Biot to know that I represent your Lato fan club from Columbia High School.
Last fall, we were approached by Dr. Gaines and central office staff in the late fall to examine and collect some data on potentials for some alternative schedules as a result of some of the surveys that came back during the Prop R process that we went through, as well as some things that we've seen along the way. So he asked us to just kind of look at and come up with some data points and start to examine some alternative schedules that we can use. Thank you. That we could go through to bring forth and present to you today.
So we thought we would first begin our presentation by giving a little bit of background, a little bit of history on the scheduling within the Melville School District. Melville School District around 1997-98 transformed from a traditional high school schedule into the block schedule. Coincidentally, it had happened to be about the same time that the A+ designations were implemented. Throughout the last 15 years or so, there's been numerous times when block scheduling has come up for conversation. Most recently, last year's surveys, it was mentioned a couple times as a financial savings or potential financial savings item. So the process of this conversation, this review, the research that's been done started about 8 or 9 months ago with some literature review, just reviews of different dissertations, academic articles, different research that's available on various types of scheduling. There were some policy reviews of our own school district. There was school visits that were made and research on about 35 to 40 school districts that are comparable to the Melville School District in terms of size, scores, location, proximity. Data was collected. You'll hear a lot about the data tonight, different data pieces that were examined and researched. Potential calendars, schedules were also created, and then an analysis of what could be determined as potential pros and cons of various different schedule forms.
So through our research, there's 3 schedules that were pretty prevalent with the surrounding school districts, and that was the block schedule, the traditional, and the hybrid. Block schedules, but what we've been on for the past 18 years, consists of 8 courses students are assigned. They're assigned alternating A-day, B-day schedules, 4 courses per day, and about 90-minute blocks per course. And they alternate again, A days to B days, and that's what we've been doing going this year will be our 19th year. Traditional is what we were on before that. A lot of schools are still on it. It's essentially a 7-period day where classes will meet every single day, 1 to 7, without any A-day, B-day alternation. A hybrid schedule is essentially a combination of both of those schedules. 3 days of schedule in a hybrid would be a traditional schedule. 2 days would be a block schedule, where that traditional schedule would be split and students would meet on alternating days. As you see, there's a variety of options that schools that we have researched had with the hybrid. As you see, Monday, Tuesday, students are attending a schedule on a traditional way. Wednesday is a B day. That would be the first block schedule. A C day is the second portion of that block schedule. The caveat is what we see is with the flex time. In districts that we have talked to and we have researched are doing different things with that flex time. And you'll see as we present our data, we've included those options to give you a picture of what that may look like in our district. Flex time can be used as additional intervention time per the week. It can be used as a time that's scheduled where we have early release every single day, is what school districts are doing, or they're alternating that flex time, as in once it is going to be extra intervention time, the following week it is going to be early release day time for professional development.
So once we determined the different schedule models that we wanted to look at, we then wanted to identify different data points that we'd be able to use to compare the three and look at how we can best serve our students. So we looked at several different data points, and you can see several of them up there, things from contact and instructional time, professional development time and plan time, staffing needs, and things like that. When we initially started our research and we looked at about 24 different districts and how those were identified. We're looking at schools with similar APR scores as well as our enrollment peer groups and then local peer groups. So out of those 24 different districts, that totaled 40 high schools, and 9 of those districts were on a traditional model, 8 are currently using some sort of hybrid, and then 6 are still using block, and that 6 does include Melville. Parkway is in its own category just because they have 4 high schools, 2 of which are using a block similar to what we use, and 2 are on more of a hybrid, so I kind of separated them out. And then now what we'll do is get a little bit more in depth into the different data points.
So the next few slides you'll see will look very similar to this. We kind of broke the data down into different pieces and won't get into all the numbers necessarily, but you can see on the far right the block, which is our current practice. Traditional is just to the left there, and then the hybrid. And as John and Jason mentioned, the hybrid is really kind of hard to define just by name. Hybrid means you're taking different pieces or different things and putting them together. So there's a multitude of different hybrid schedules that are out there. But these are the 3 that we kind of looked at for the sake of comparison of data. One thing to also note is that all of the information that's presented is kind of based on models created based on our 2016-17 calendar, because that's a known entity to us as far as school days and things like that. Also noted that our school day, 7:15 to 2:05. So everything kind of fits within those parameters. The first piece, as Jason mentioned, the first 2 pieces I should say on this slide are contact time and instructional time. We decided to distinguish between the 2, just for the sake of, again, comparison. Contact time is students sitting in a classroom, instructional time being in an academic class. The big difference there, TAP at Melville High School, the teacher advisory period, if you will, the AMP, academic networking period at Oakville High School, kind of is that intervention time, study hall time, where kids can get some work done. That's where the differences between contact and instructional time come in. Along those lines, student interventions, you can kind of see where there's some differences between each of the options. One of the things that we had to consider for the sake of facilities is, lunch, fitting kids, getting, at Melville High School, 1,800 kids, at Oakville High School, 1,600 kids through lunch, and the size of the cafeterias. One of the things in the traditional and hybrid schedule, we kind of implemented a quote, what we called in our meetings a tiger or panther period, to kind of make that 25-minute lunch work with, balancing the length of the class when lunch occurs with the rest of the classes throughout the day. And then lastly, for me, is teacher professional development time. Block, as it currently stands, as it says on the slide, there are early release days. That model would be continued with the traditional schedule. That's again what we've seen in looking at different districts that are out there. The hybrid, the real difference there is, and John kind of mentioned it with that flex time, it's built in through that day. So the C-day flex time, there are some school districts that have an early release every week. Some do it a couple times a month. Some do it on a monthly basis. So we, again, kind of compare just so you can kind of see the whole scope, and we could compare the whole scope of what the hybrid has to offer, traditional and block.
The next thing we looked at was teacher plan time. Teacher plan time, every teacher has a plan period every single day, so all 5 days of the week. Right now on the block schedule, that's about a 90-minute period, so that calculates out to about 450 minutes a week. On the other schedules, again, as Andy said, to try to fit within our 7:15 to 2:05 time frame, we broke it down to approximately a 47-minute period each day. So if we did that and the teachers had one planned period each day, you can see where those numbers would come up in terms of the planned time for that. And on early release day, we would, before we would start the PD or whatever the case was, we figured we would add an additional 20-minute period from the time the students left before we started that PD time so the teachers could get themselves together and what they needed to do for that. Then we came to the full-time FTE positions. And again, FTEs is not just classroom teachers, but it includes librarians and counselors as well. Okay, we just did some simple math on this to try to calculate how many we have, and so that you understand where we came up with that was we took, where we came up with our numbers is we took our number of teachers in each individual department that we have for this current year, coming up the 16-17 year, and multiplied that times 5, because each teacher has 5 teaching assignments during that time frame. And that came up with how many sections of things that we would have. And then to calculate what would happen in the others, we took that, we're now teaching 6 sections instead of 5. So we took the same number of sections that we would require for each thing and divided by 6, and that's where we came up with how many teachers we would need for each department, added all of those together, and that's where you get your total number of teaching positions and your FTEs for each of those other individual programs or schedule options that we have there. Average class size, that's a big one for us to look at too. Average class size, what we did was we estimated, say at Melville has 1,800 students. Each student enrolls in 7 academic periods, so we took the 1,800 times 7. That's how many classes we would have. Okay, we took their staff numbers, their current that they have, which 102.2, multiplied that times 5. Again, that's how many that they would teach at that point. Okay, and that's where you get your students per class. Okay, for the other options that are there, the numbers go down, and that's because the teachers are going 6 instead of 5. And an easy way to kind of think about that is why they go down at that point is under the current system. During any particular period or any particular block, you have 1/4 of your teachers who are on a prep period, whereas during the traditional schedule or on the hybrid, you would have only 1/7 of your teachers that are on a prep period during that time frame. So again, you're having 75% of your teachers teach during any one period, or 86% of your teachers teach during one period. So that allows for a reduced class size.
The final couple data points that we looked at, one of them were credits possible, and we start off by looking at just the DESE requirements, which is 24 credits. And the one thing that we wanted to ensure is that in any of these models, our students still have the same opportunities to take the academic classes that they want to. And you can see here that regardless of the model that was in place, the opportunity is for them to earn 28 credits during their 4 years, and that does not include anything that they may earn from middle school with the Algebra 1 or foreign language programs or summer school, night school, things like that. But it is consistent across all the different models. This is just taking all the data from all the different slides and kind of compiling it into one slide for you to see all the different data points that we looked at. And everything that we've talked up to this point has been over the course of a year, looking at all those numbers over the course of that 170 days. And so what we wanted to do here was just take kind of a smaller snapshot. And this is a 2-week period, so 10 school days is a 2-week period where there were no early releases or days off or anything like that. But just in those 2 weeks, we compared instructional time and that intervention time, which we have already done previously. And then the bottom column there is class meetings, how frequently the class would meet over that 10-day period. So then for the remainder of the presentation, what we wanted to do is take all the different data and numbers that we had looked at and kind of just turn that into a little bit of a conversation looking at those pros and cons.
So as Jason kind of alluded to, you've seen a lot of data, a lot of numbers up to this point, so we thought we would put some words on the screen to kind of determine what we found to be pros and cons of each of the 3 that we researched. For block schedules, one could consider some of the pros as more student intervention time. There's a high level of teacher plan time. It's very familiar to the students, teachers, community. There's more time for lab-based courses. Cons for the block schedule, It's the least amount of instructional and contact time that was researched. There's less professional development time, higher personnel costs, highest average class size, although that's a very nominal statistic, and most time between class meetings, being as students only see teachers every other day in the block schedule. Traditional schedule, increased instructional and contact time, smaller class sizes because of there being more periods. It meets every day, which provides some continuity for students and teachers. Students have experienced that type of schedule in middle school, so they have somewhat of a familiarity with it. Lower personnel costs. Cons, less student intervention time, less professional development time. This provides the least amount of teacher plan time and less time for lab-based courses. And for the hybrid, again, there's an infinite number of different hybrid schedules you could propose. Pros to those: most instructional and contact time, most potential professional development time. Class sizes, again, are a little smaller. It does provide continuity, as you do have a little bit of both. You have a traditional schedule and block. Block days have more time for lab-based courses. Cons to the hybrid schedule: you have less student intervention time, least amount or lesser amount of teacher plan time, and I think it's very unfamiliar to many people at this point.
So we know we threw a lot of information at you, and what we're hoping is that what we truly did was provide the groundwork for a deeper conversation among this topic. In about 2 weeks, the board's going to hear a presentation about the early work from the Innovative High School Committee. Within that committee, you're going to hear a lot of the great things that we're already doing in this district that we need to do a much better job of highlighting and promoting. And as we move forward, with this subject, talking about the schedule committee, we want to make sure that we're operating on a schedule, whatever that schedule may be, that has the agility to support all of these personalized learning paths. We do some amazing things in this district. We have students that will be attending part day Oakville or Melville and then go into the CAPS program. Or we have students who are using the virtual program that will graduate this year. They're accessing it from Europe because they had opportunities there. What if? What if we have options for kids and we can provide that structure moving forward? The important component of that is, our next step is we need to invite our teachers to be part of that conversation. We need to invite our students, our staff members, and the rest of the community. This is a community school. It's their decision on what they want their school to look like. And we want to develop a schedule review committee looking at site visits, reviewing data, looking at the research, and investigating the possibilities moving forward. We've already planned meetings at each high school that are conducive to getting feedback from our community at large, with the goal of presenting our findings and a recommendation at the board in December.